When did I stop meditating, pick up my phone and look at Instagram? Like it, like I worked to it.
It can be really scary when it's genuinely mindless. You know, like people say mindless scrolling or mindless interaction with social media. And I think most of the time it's not mindless. Unfortunately, it's mindful and you're very aware of what you're doing and you're doing it anyway. But there are moments where you are actually mindless, and that's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you're just like an automaton, like next. And then you're like, I don't even, you scroll back through, like, I didn't even watch these last 4 videos. I mean, they washed over me, but I couldn't pick them out of a lineup.
I think it's dissociating. Isn't that dissociation? You're just like, I don't know, I can't be here, scroll. And I'm not really here either. I'm somewhere. I'm neither here nor there. Somewhere disassociated in between.
Well, I think the interesting and beautiful thing about humans is there's always, everything's a false summit. You know, it's not like we're not going to be living in this. The summit isn't like peak content where we just go down to like 1 second content, half a second content, single frame, just hypercut of like, you know, like everyone's phone is like that scene in Clockwork Orange where you're just like getting slammed with imagery. You know, it has a tipping point where people just get sick of it. It's no longer novel. There's no longer, you know, you've seen all the content, you've seen all the faces, you've seen all the points of view. Like, I don't care about it anymore. What's interesting is what will happen in the rain shadow of this, so to speak, or once we get over this false summit and we head towards the next summit. You know, once you don't trust influencers anymore because you know everyone that's on there that's saying anything about anything is being paid to do so. Once you don't want to watch these short form things, once you don't want the new clip, once you don't want the new probiotic, once you don't want the new whatever subscription for fucking socks or whatever the fuck it is, once we've gotten over this false summit, what are all the things we have gotten over and dispensed with? Is it consumerism in general? Is it advertisement and marketing in general? Because we no longer trust the brands. Now we don't even trust individuals to give us their opinion. What's, you know, like, is it like peak opinion? And then what's on the other side of that? When I think about shedding all those things, although I've been in marketing for 20 years, when I think about shedding trust in anyone that you don't have personal experience with, shedding the idea of ever lending trust or lending credibility to someone that you can't reach out and touch and know. And if that's over at the other side of this false summit, if consumerism takes a big, you know, right turn after that, if marketing takes a big right turn after that, maybe even a nosedive into nothingness, it might not be the worst thing for humanity. You know, like we're on this really interesting curve. I think we talked about this before, but it's like, you know, you have the phase where like the company or the corporations are building a life around their brand. You know, it's like the Cadillac neighborhood of the future. You know, people kind of got sick of that into the 60s. And that was, you know, 1969 and Woodstock and free love and all that. And then people were kind of in this purgatory in the 70s, just doing cocaine and dancing weird. And then it was like peak capitalism and Gordon Gekko and Lamborghinis and Wall Street in the 80s. And then the 90s was sort of, you know, the rejection of that again. And then we're kind of going through the same cycle. Definitely the aughts were like the 80s, you know, it was like boy bands and brands and fucking everything turned into it's like skating is a brand, it's a video game, it's a this, and it's like punk rock is being, you know, skating and punk rock are being monetized and marketed and
hot topic.
And now we're like reaching peak that, and it's like, what is the next? You know, it feels very much like we're in the next Woodstock, we're in the next grunge. But I think given everything we know now and the gravity of the moment, it's going to be very different. I think it's going to be way more transformative.
The whole like brands thing I think about a lot ever since finding out that I have ADHD, which I found out on a date like 3 years ago. She was like, "Oh, you have ADHD." And I was like, "What?" And then turns out I went down a few rabbit holes. It explains everything. But ADHD and masking is something that I learned about, which is interesting. And then I thought about, well, why have I always been so into brands and this idea of like brands are these like really perfectly sculpted masks of ideas. You know, it's like, here's this thing. It represents us, even though it doesn't at all.